Welcome to the ANS event, Our Nuclear Family, Empowering Parents and Caregivers in the Nuclear Industry. My name is Ira Strong, and I am a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the American Nuclear Society. And today, I have the privilege of serving as a moderator for this important discussion. Today, we are here to celebrate the invaluable contributions of parents and caregivers in the nuclear industry, while exploring ways to continue our work to foster diversity and inclusion within our community. This event is not just about acknowledging challenges faced by parents and caregivers, but most importantly, to highlight the industry's commitment to supporting them. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to cover a few logistical points. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A and we'll address them at the end of the session. The event is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to registrants tomorrow. Additionally, a certificate of attendance is available upon request. Look at the chat for more information. We ask that all participants adhere to the ANS Code of Ethics and Respectful Behavior Policy, which can be found at ans.org. Let's ensure that our discussion today is respectful and inclusive. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists, our great panelists, who have all made significant contributions to empower the nuclear industry. We have Dr. Todd Palmer, professor at Oregon State University, Nuclear Science and Engineering. Todd Palmer is a University Distinguished Professor of Nuclear Engineering at Oregon State University and a Fellow of the American Nuclear Society. He has been in academia at OSU for nearly 30 years. Prior to joining OSU, he was a physicist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He also spent a year in 2011 as a scientist in the computational physics group at Los Alamos National Laboratory. His technical expertise is in computational methods for radiation transport, high-performance computing, and reactor physics. Between 2018 and 2020, he served as the Associate Dean for Faculty Advancement in the OSU College of Engineering, where he was principally responsible for programs that support hiring, faculty development, faculty recognition, and promotion and tenure. He was also champion for COE's Community Goal and author COE's First. During his time as Associate Dean, he supported faculty hiring in COE in the use of search advocacy, a systematic approach to search practices that attempts to identify and mitigate the impacts of implicit bias. Now, we have Dr. Cheryl O'Brien, principal and founder, Vision for Inclusive Engineering Workforce, Inc. Dr. O'Brien worked for 34 years, first at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard as a naval architect, and then at Idaho National Laboratory in Engineering and Management as a registered professional engineer. Dr. O'Brien directed engineering programs, including bridging green building design and clean energy advocacy to the laboratory as one of the lead accredited professionals in Idaho. Post-career, she completed a Doctor of Arts degree in political science with focus on state legislative adoption of nuclear energy policy. She then worked as associate director for a nonprofit organization advancing women in business before founding Vision for Inclusive Engineering Workforce in 2023, a nonprofit that supports higher education students, retention of professional, re-entry into workforce, focusing on engineering careers. Next, we have Marsha McDaniel, Director of International Engagement at Idaho National Laboratory. She's a former United States diplomat, focused on trade promotion with assignments in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China, the U.S. Consulate in Hong Kong, China, and the U.S. Consulate in Mumbai, India. Marsha has received numerous awards and honors during her diplomatic service, including a Meritorious Honor Award from the U.S. Department of State. Marsha is a dedicated gender equity advocate and has led numerous initiatives to improve workplace conditions for women. She currently chairs Idaho Women in Nuclear. Marsha holds a BA in International Affairs from George Washington's University and MA in Government from Johns Hopkins University. Next, we have Christine Seitz, co-founder Mothers for Nuclear. Christine is a licensed professional civil engineer, project manager, and environmental advocate with over 22 years of experience in energy. Christine leads PG&E's generation and strategic sourcing team, including materials and services sourcing responsibility for California's largest source of emission-free electricity at the Diablo Canyon, as well as strategic sourcing for PG&E's hydro, renewable, and fossil assets. Christine is co-founder of Mothers for Nuclear, and she believes in supporting all clean energy sources to address major humanitarian and environmental issues. Along with Heather Hobb, Christine founded Mothers for Nuclear in 2016 to advocate for clean energy, focused on the protection and expansion of nuclear energy around the world. But before we continue, I want to share exciting news. As part of our commitment to understanding and addressing the needs of parents and caregivers in our industry, we conducted a survey to gather insights and feedback. I am pleased to announce that the result from the survey will be available on our webinar page, and also in the chat, you can find a link to the survey. This information provides invaluable insights into experiences faced by our community, and we encourage everyone to take a look. Now, as we collectively strive to uphold the nuclear industry as the global benchmark for safety and reliability, we recognize the importance of excellence, not only in our operations, but also in our workplace culture. The commitment to being the best includes ensuring that our policies set the standard for inclusivity, providing a model for industries worldwide. Supporting parents and caregivers is not only aligned with the nuclear industry values of diversity and inclusivity, but it also directly contributes to the industry's commitment and goals for the future. As countries pledge to triple nuclear energy capacity by 2050, recognizing its key role in reaching net zero emissions, it becomes increasingly important to ensure that the workforce is supported and empowered. Investing in parental support is an investment in the industry's future growth and sustainability, as it ensures that we can attract and retain the best talent to drive the nuclear industry forward. By supporting parents, we are not only supporting individuals and families, but also the industry's commitment to a cleaner, more sustainable future. So now, let's dive into this important discussion. Each of our panelists have been involved in activities that support parents or caregivers. Could each one of you please share more about one of those initiatives and how impactful it was? We can start with Dr. Palmer.
Thank you, Ira. Yeah, sure. I'd like to talk just a little bit about my role as the Associate Dean for Faculty Advancement in College of Engineering and how we enabled improved hiring practices. And then once we onboarded faculty, new faculty, in particular junior faculty, and how we supported them through the process of development and through promotion and tenure. When you bring in new faculty, people who have received PhDs and who are starting in faculty roles, often they've put off starting their families until they have that first job. And so when you bring people in and interview them, one of the first things they'll ask you is, what sorts of supports are available for us if we start families here at Oregon State? And so we were prepared for those questions, and we could talk about options for childcare, which were meager at the time, but also, clearly an important aspect of what we were trying to develop at Oregon State to make sure that families could be supported. And then also, how do you support people when they are, when they need tenure clock extensions to address the birth of a child, to deal with postpartum concerns, both for mostly for women, but also for fathers who are also doing caregiving after a child's been born. So we would talk about the idea that tenure clock extensions are available for people. You can request that, and we support that, and we don't penalize people for taking an additional year to ensure that they are progressing in their development as faculty. Also, just trying to tailor the supports for faculty so that we recognize the individual needs that families have. That's not a vanilla sort of a set of things that everybody needs. It's really specific to everyone's situation, and so we don't force people to use things that they don't need. We try to tailor supports where they're useful. We'll work with individual faculty to move their teaching schedules around, to adjust that around the arrival of a new child. Try to use FMLA where it makes sense. So we really did try to make people aware of all of the support systems that we have available at OSU, and then craft something that worked specifically for them to ensure they could continue to make progress toward their promotion. Those are the sorts of things that we tried very hard to do during my time, and also support for dual career hires. I mean, often we would be recruiting a faculty member and they would have a career partner, and we would really need to pay attention to ensuring that if we could find a good fit for them as well. So we were very careful to try to pursue those things. I think I'll leave it there for the other panelists to talk next, but I'm happy to address any of those initiatives and questions if they come up.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. I think we can go next with Cheryl.
Sure. Well, probably the most impact I had during my career was working my way into a senior leadership position. Every time you move from being an individual contributor into a position of management and then further into senior management, you get a lot more influence, and people take your thoughts seriously and act upon it. So recognizing, that level of power, putting that to work, and probably being one of the few women engineers at the laboratory, because engineers still to this day only represent 15%. Women only represent 15% of women in engineering careers, or of all people in engineering careers, is that I would get asked to be on a lot of committees, whatever it was, promotion committees or awards committees for researchers or others. And so I used that position, that power I had, to always take a breath. Let's take a step back. What are we doing for our mothers? Are we sure we're promoting the right people? Because I would hear, we have to promote him because he is going to leave for another job. He's looking at other jobs. We don't have to promote her because her husband works here too, and she's not going to leave. We've got her anyway. I would hear that. And it's hard to be the person who has to stand up and say, all right, but that is not being equitable, and it's not healthy for our environment either. It's a very hard part to fight, but you have to do that personally. At this point, I'm only in the first year of my nonprofit, and it is about retaining women in the workforce and also helping students get through college. So I've been looking at a lot of research, both interviewing a lot of engineers and then also going in the database and the literature and seeing what the social sciences and their surveys have shown. And one thing that you'll find I'm a great advocate for now is when women do go part-time, and men do too. And the data that I pulled up lately is that when people have their first child, this from a 2019 study, so it's pretty recent, 43% of our women, and this is in STEM, so not specific to nuclear career, not specific to engineering, 43% will not maintain at full-time. 43%. 20% of new fathers also will either go part-time or find another career. And there's many reasons for that. But I'm a personal advocate for making that part-time temporary, because also there's data in these studies that if you stay part-time, even though it may fit your needs for amount of time, then you kind of are in that death spiral where you don't get the media assignments, you don't get the ones with travel, you don't get on the committees because they're not sure about your dedication being true or not. That's a perception. So I've always helped women throughout my career noticing this as a manager, even before I got my hands on the data that shows that this is true, to do your best, that if you need to take part-time, take care of a senior family member or a child, that's fine, but keep your eye on the ball and come back if you want a meaningful career.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And that reminds me of us as engineers, right? Working in the industry or human performance improvement tools, right? Using validating assumptions, doing all of that is really helpful also when we applied it to our workplace culture. So now let's go with Marsha McDaniel.
Thank you, Ira. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of us in the West. I was so excited to accept the invitation to participate today and share my perspective. I think in a lot of ways, I'm a typical Gen X woman in the sense that I still have kids at home, 3 kids, although 2 of them are teenagers, so you can't really refer to them as kids, but nevertheless, they still live with me. And at the same time, I'm starting to grapple with the early stages of elder care. And it's out-of-state elder care, which of course is very complicated. So as I have navigated some of these challenges over the past couple of years, I've come to the realization that caregiving responsibilities will never go away. Even if your kids grow up and leave the house, then the elder care really will start to kick in. And there are no easy solutions, no easy answers, but I do know that I'm not alone. I know that thousands of people across the country throughout this industry are dealing with similar challenges. So I think for one, just creating spaces where we can talk, that alone helps. So I'm really grateful that ANS is hosting this conversation today, and I certainly hope to see more of these types of conversations going forward. In terms of a specific project that I've worked on here at INL, so about 3 years ago, I was involved in an internal committee that was looking at different options to help create childcare resources in our community. And at the time, I had a full-time nanny who was looking after my youngest child, and she was great. I had perfect childcare; it was wonderful. But occasionally, the nanny would go on vacation, or occasionally would be sick. In those occasions, either me or my husband, we would have to take time off of work. So I brought this experience to the committee and shared that, and just asked the question, hey, could INL consider establishing an emergency or backup daycare program? And luckily, the committee, they embraced that idea, and HR was involved. So HR did all the legwork, they did all the research, and found a local childcare provider, a local daycare center that would partner with us. And a few months later, this program was launched. So now we have this emergency backup daycare program that's available for all ages, from ages 6 weeks old up until school-age children. I just used the program about a month ago. My son's preschool was unexpectedly closed. I think it was a snow day. And so I just called them up, and sure enough, they had a spot. I drove them over, paid the daily rate, and that was that. So really grateful that INL established that program, and look forward to exploring other solutions during this hour.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that insight. I have also used that emergency childcare program, so it's helping a lot of people out there. And then next we have Christine. Please go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, thank you, Ira. I'm honored to be here on this panel. And when you asked, I felt like, well, I'm still going through these challenges, being a caregiver and parent in nuclear. And it's an honor to be able to share what I've learned along the way with you all. And especially an honor because in nuclear, we do so many things so well. And one of those things that we do well is learning from each other. And this topic is no exception. So I am really grateful that ANS is hosting this panel. That being said, there are a lot of things around work-life balance and supportive caregivers that nuclear does not do well currently. But I have a lot of hope that the questioning attitude and the tenacity around continuous improvement that's so just widespread in the nuclear industry, that tenacity is going to move us towards making nuclear a leader in this space. So in 2016, I started Mothers for Nuclear with coworker and good friend Heather Hoff, and we wanted to highlight the people in nuclear, the people behind the machines, and our humanity and our care. And I truly believe that nuclear is great because of the people. We have an amazing technology, but it's the people behind the technology that make us great. So it has to be a top priority to support those people. I've been working at Diablo Canyon Power Plant for over 20 years. And so my experience in nuclear is from that perspective. When I had my first child, I was working in engineering at Diablo Canyon, and I appreciated what Dr. O'Brien just said about her experience in engineering and being one of the only women in the room. They certainly had no accommodations for new mothers. I remember it was so cute. My group held a baby shower for me because I was the first engineer in their memory that had a baby at work. I mean, there'd been lots of dads, and that's great too, but like an actual engineer to have a baby, they were so supportive, but I think they just didn't know how to be supportive really because it wasn't a common thing. And there'd been a hiring lull. There wasn't really a lot of young people at that time. There were two other women at the plant who had children recently, just before me. And when I asked them about their experience, it was kind of a bit of a horror story. And they didn't feel comfortable speaking up. One ended up quitting completely because of lack of accommodation. And I know the other stopped breastfeeding early because of lack of accommodation. So I knew this, and I tried to plan ahead and make sure accommodations would be in place when I returned to work after that pregnancy. And surprise, day one, I come back and they were not there. And it was really difficult. And I think, again, everyone meant well. They just didn't really know how to support. I had a previous boss who had a saying that I repeat to myself all the time. He said, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right yet, it's not the end yet. And I love that. And what it means to me is I need to roll up my sleeves and make it all right. So that's what I did. And I teamed with other women, human resources, and our local breastfeeding coalition. We wrote a workplace policy to support nursing mothers. And then we teamed with our on-site facilities team to identify space and remodel rooms. We bought hospital-grade breast pumps and attachment kits for women, and we got a great program in place. That policy that we wrote, we revised it a few times. We learned a lot, and it ended up becoming the basis for the policy that's in place now at Pacific Gas and Electric Company for the whole company. So we were leaders in that space. I'm so proud of that. We ended up winning an award from the state of California on our policy and our accommodations for breastfeeding mothers. So I just, when I think about that experience, that was with my first child, and I'm dealing with other challenges now. I have 3 kids, some teens, which is a whole other set of challenges, and a kindergartner still. And when I think about things that I'm challenged with now, being a caregiver, I think if it's not all right yet, what am I going to do to make it right? Because I want those people who come behind me to have a great experience, and I want to be part of leading that change.
Wow, Christine, thank you. I like that quote from your boss. I'm gonna steal it, right? If it's not all right yet, it's not the end. So let's, all of us take that into consideration. And that's really good, right? That I really appreciate like all the panelists for, sharing, this important initiatives that you guys have been able to do. Though that's remarkable. That means that the nuclear industry has the right people and it's really moving forward. And that's the mentality that we want to have. And it's clear that, they're having many impactful efforts, right? And I'm pretty sure there are many other efforts on their way to support parents and caregivers in this industry. And yeah, those stories, they really fill me with joy. So I really appreciate it. So now I have some questions related to, different topics like understanding challenges, supporting work-life balance, or flexible work arrangement, also talking about work culture, and also addressing unconscious biases. So I'm gonna go pick one question regarding understanding challenges. So the first one will be, what are some of the challenges that you have observed or experienced as a parent or caregiver in the nuclear industry right now? Yes, anyone can just jump in. Should I pick? Christine, you're the first one in my list here.
Oh boy. So challenges I've observed or experienced as a parent. I would say certainly COVID was a challenge for all of us, but one of the silver linings of that is that we learned that we could have more flexibility with our work schedules. And I think prior to COVID, that was a real challenge. And I would say, what I've learned through being at a nuclear power plant pre-COVID and now post-COVID is I really value that flexibility, but that's the key word, flexibility. I think that's more important than remote work. That's really more flexibility early on would have really helped me so much. Oh my gosh, I can't even say. But what I see now is when people are hesitant to come back into the workplace, that can be its own set of challenges, because if you want to be in the room where it happens, you have to be in the room. And so I really liked, again, what Dr. O'Brien said earlier about taking the time you need, but then keeping your eye on the ball and coming back. And I'd say when you're thinking about your career path, choose wisely what positions you're looking at according to the level of flexibility that you can accommodate. And think about that from both sides. Flexibility goes both ways. You can want and work for more flexibility in your job, but what flexibility are you building in with your caregiving responsibilities? For me, at a certain point, this looked like having live-in childcare when my kids were very young, and also the backup childcare that was discussed earlier. We established a program like that at Diablo Canyon Power Plant, so we could call and get that emergency care, so we could support emergent issues at the power plant. That power plants run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's one of the great things about nuclear energy, but it's also one of the really challenging things, because that power plant does not respect my time off, my time with my family. But I found that that's okay with me. That flexibility that I want, it does go both ways. So while I might want kind of a strange schedule today, I'm going to go to kindergarten parent day in the afternoon. I'm going to need 2 hours out of my schedule to do that, but I've planned around that. And I know that means I'm going to be working later at night tonight, and that's okay. And so, it's a challenge to build that flexibility into your schedule, but it's also an opportunity. And I think it's like a misconception that we can have it all. We can't always have it all. We have to make sacrifices, but we can choose what we want to go after and build space in our day so that we can have what it is we want.
I think I'll go next, and that is I just wanted to also echo something that Dr. O'Brien said when she was introducing herself. And that's the kind of the concept of and challenge of invisible work that is often really borne by folks who are underrepresented in our communities, women in particular, people of color. There are all of these initiatives that are designed to try to change the cultures that we have in our systems. And often that extra work is borne by those folks in those groups. And it is incredibly challenging to do that work and to be successful in the actual work you've been hired to do, the technical work. And so, one of the things we've been trying to do is find ways to mitigate that, try to find ways to share that invisible work, not put everybody in these very small pockets of our underrepresented populations on all these committees and bury them in all of this work. And so, really step up if you're in the more represented populations and serve in these capacities. So I think that's a challenge. And I've seen a lot of our junior faculty, particularly women, serving on a lot of committees that are, make it very tough for them to do the other work that we've hired them to do. So that's one example of a challenge that I see people facing.
And that is a very good point. I appreciate that, Dr. Palmer, about getting spread too thin, because we do look for diversity and inclusion committees. Well, if you don't have many, then you're spread thin. But I would also advise you that it's also an opportunity to use your voice and use your power, and make an impactful for the generations coming from you. As I was going through some of the literature on retention, one of the topics that talks about is important of having policy, whether that's federal or state legislation and law, or actually company policy, and then training and cultural shifting towards that. And the training, that's very slow, hard process. But what the research is finding at the moment is, yes, that industry might offer parental leave for both the men and the women, or the partner and the partner, that they offer that. But that one thing people complain about is resentment, that if one spouse is taking advantage of that, that the other spouse, when they also want to take advantage of that their peers and coworkers are resentful. They think they're gaming the system or getting by with something. And so there's a lot of both explicit and implicit bias in that. And while I had my children a long time ago, I remember being in my cubicle and my coworkers standing outside my cubicle discussing how they were sure glad their wives didn't have to work and their wives could just stay home. And provided that's ancient history, but that's also my example how if you just keep working away, and like as Kristen's boss says, if things don't turn out well, then we're not done yet. So just keep chipping away at it and recognize, especially, I loved all Ira's notes about the importance of implicit and explicit bias. It's here very hard to work away at it, but it's possible.
I'll share one of the challenges that I've experienced. So travel when you have young children at home. I think in some cases you have to be ready to move mountains to go on that business trip. I have had to turn down so many different important meetings because, either my husband was traveling or what have you. And on some occasions we had even made arrangements. If my husband was traveling, we were going to have the nanny stay over for one night. And then at the last minute, the child gets sick and I just cannot leave. So this has happened to me multiple times. But travel is very important, whether it's you're presenting at a scientific conference or whether you're going to a networking event. It's important on so many levels. It's important for the networking, for your own knowledge, for learning purposes. So, I really am a strong supporter of travel. But I literally have had to move mountains in some cases. And I think the craziest example was when I was living in Beijing, China. I was actually interviewing for my current role at Idaho National Lab, and the lab was flying me out from China. And my husband, I think, was in Canada at the time. So we literally had to fly in my mother-in-law from New Mexico to Beijing, China, which is just crazy. So she could watch the kids while I flew to Idaho. Luckily, she wanted to see China. It was exciting, so it all worked out great. But yeah, sometimes you just have to be willing to move mountains to travel, or be willing to just accept the fact that you're not going to be able to go.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, those are very, diverse opinions and experiences. And that is important because, we all, go through any of those things. I have also experienced travel with an infant, and sometimes, it's maybe not be as fun as we would like to be. Might be a little messy, but we still have to push through, or accept that it might be a challenge that we won't be able to overcome at the moment. But also following some of the information that Dr. Ryan was talking about, addressing those unconscious bias. There's another question, right? Because I think this is an important topic. And how can organizations ensure that assumptions and stereotypes about caregivers do not influence hiring, promotions, or even performance evaluations? So let's open the floor. I have Christine first in my list.
I got to get on the back of your list. I think it's difficult, and we've spoken a little bit about those biases, but depending on where in the nuclear industry you are, whether you're in academia and in a lab, in research, at a power plant, those biases crop up differently. I feel like there's a perception, at least in nuclear energy, that we don't have more women in nuclear because of the demanding work schedule. And to me, there's a little bit of that rings true, but there's also a little bit of that's offensive, because I work really hard, and a demanding work schedule doesn't scare me away. And I know it doesn't scare a lot of women away. So we're willing to work hard. And there's a lot of fathers in the workplace too, but somehow they don't seem to get that same, assumption about them that the work schedule is going to scare them away. But it's a challenge for both men and women. And whether you have a young child at home, or whether you have elder parents or family members that you're responsible to care for, all of us are going to need some accommodation at some point in time, if we're human and we have loved ones who depend on us. So, I think another challenge is that in order to get around this, we end up asking women to be on hiring panels and be on committees. And when you're one of the only women, in that pool that they're looking at, that occupies a lot of your time. So I think we need to do better at building advocates and recognizing those biases throughout the existing workforce, so that we can build more advocates and get in front of those biases. Because I see that while a lot of us, at some point are going to need accommodations, it doesn't mean we're not engaged in our jobs. It doesn't mean that nuclear is not right for us. It means that we all have to be a little bit flexible to keep that great talent in the pipeline, and make sure that we're not overlooking great talent because of our assumptions about how they will contribute.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. It's really important. So now let's go with Dr. Palmer.
I just would echo exactly what Kristen just said. I mean, I think the key is you have to have people in these rooms who are aware of and looking for these sorts of biases that are there, and calling them out when they come up. I mean, you just have to point that out. I know why you might be thinking that, but that isn't, that is not what we're after here. We're after an inclusive community that supports all of our employees. We do it in hiring, we do it in promotion and, advancement. And, there needs to be people around the table that are really looking out for implicit bias and of course, explicit bias too. I mean, that should be the most obvious kind of bias, and you don't want that. But it's these things that are really hard to and difficult to change because they're baked in and deep seated, and you don't really see them. And so having a variety of people around the table who are more aware of where that could come from can help in those conversations. You really need staunch advocates. It's important.
Now, Marsha, if you would like to share something with us. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, I think my comments really are just building on everything that's already been said. I'm a big fan of having interview committees as diverse as possible. And when I say diverse, I really mean from outside the organization, people that you don't work with every single day, even external individuals on those interview committees, so that everyone there has a completely fresh perspective. Nobody is coming, with these prepackaged notions of the candidates' qualifications or abilities, and everyone can come to these hiring conclusions, just based on the facts. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah, thank you, Marsha. So now, Dr. O'Brien.
Well, the research and the data indicates, if you've ever looked at that hiring biases and how that works, is that yes, when we're hiring people, we all have a natural tendency to hire somebody who's just like ourselves. So that's bad news. Certainly that introduces a lot of implicit bias, but it's also good news, because I'd like to think, as we've all recognized doing hiring by a committee rather than a single person. And I think the industry is getting better that way, and that's getting recognized, that eventually we are climbing the hill right now, but that means we've got a slope on the way down. When we do have a more diverse workforce, and this natural tendency to hire people similar to ourselves is going to be self-fulfilling. So that's the good news. I also wanted to comment on Kristen's observation about this is an argument for quality work versus long hours. Oh, that's where I was going. Is that the literature is mixed on calling out long, gruesome hours in STEM fields for people not wanting to go there, or else for people leaving. And there's mixed data on that, but I tend to side on the literature that's saying really that those long hours are not the issue so much, because all of us that work in the nuclear industry, and particularly in engineering, know that there's a lot of different types of engineering jobs, where somewhere you need to be on the plant floor, you need to be there at midnight, other jobs where you don't. It's a paper job or a computer job. That women in particular, because that's the demographic I've been studying, tend to leave because they're not working to their potential. They know that they're not getting the best assignments. They know that somebody is assuming that they cannot go on a business trip because their kids are in softball. They know, or people, if they're taking care of a parent, they just assume that they can't take on a big assignment. So that's been something real eye-opening, that I found that it's not the nature of the work or the hours of the work, as much as people are saying, hey, they're not appreciating me, I'm not getting the good work, I'm going to go somewhere where I am appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for all that information. It's really good hearing all this, experiences and insights. And now I would like to go into questions, Q&A questions. We don't have much time because we have so much to talk about and so much to cover. This topic is, very ample, and we can spend all day talking about it, but we just have 1 hour, right? So I see a couple questions from the audience. So one of the questions is, what recommendations do you have for individual contributors navigating a large organization when they have suggestions or concerns they want to raise about parent-caregiver needs? Sometimes there is or appears to be a large divide between individual employees and actually getting something to people in HR or in positions to decide on and make policy changes.
I love this question. Can I jump in on this? Because it just rings true. I mean, when I
Yes.
started advocating for accommodations for nursing mothers, I was an individual contributor. And when I think now, like, why was that successful at the level that it was? It was because of the engagement on it. I think a lot of times when we're overwhelmed and we need help and there's a policy or a practice in place that is not serving us, we tend to just bring up the problem. But I think what was so successful about that effort was, even though I was just a lowly engineer, I brought up the problem and rolled up my sleeves with a proposal on how to make it better and brought in the external resources because, as a new mom, you have a lot of connections with those in that industry, the breastfeeding support and return to work accommodations. Like, I had access to all that and I brought it to my employer and they were grateful for it. And I think, when you're in elder care, caregiving mode, you're going to, because of what you're dealing with, you're going to have access to some of those community resources. They're going to be top of mind more than they are for that representative in HR who you're bringing your problem to. So if you want action on that, come ready to help and come with resources. And I think people appreciate that, see your engagement, and you'll be more likely to get action.
It may also be,
anybody else wants to jump in? Yeah, go ahead.
just real quick, it may also be really valuable to point to exemplars, right? If you have seen something that is working somewhere else and you're aware of how it's working, and you can just say, let's replicate this, or let's modify this to make it work here. I think that could be really valuable, because you're not trying to create an existence proof, right? You're not saying this thing doesn't exist, we need to make it. You're saying this thing does exist, we need to bring it here and make it work in our organization. I think that could really be helpful.
I think
I'll just add.
that's both great advice. And what I heard is certainly the role of the individual contributor in a large organization. That is tough because you are not heard. So also, these are great ideas to, come up with what that solution is and, look outside to see what else works. But then where do you take it? And my advice is, don't go to HR. Instead, go find the community within your organization that's also going to benefit from this. You might be surprised. You might be looking for policy that helps a new parent that's also going to help somebody in elder care, or somebody with an autistic adult child, or something like that. Go find that community. If they don't already exist, then create it. Because I hear you, the voice, being a senior manager, if we have one employee saying, oh, we should be doing this, then it's just a thorn. But when you get a crowd around you, that makes a difference. And I'm sorry to say this about human resources, because human resources people work in the nuclear industry too. But what I've learned in my many decades is human resources works for the company. They don't work for you as an individual. They work for company. They promulgate company policy that's going to be best for the bottom line. And that's what drives them.
And I'll just build on Cheryl's comments, and those are great comments, Cheryl. I think if you are an individual contributor in a large organization, chances are your large organization does have some sort of an employee resource group, whether it's your local ANS chapter or your local Women in Nuclear chapter, or any of those other organizations that might be there. That's another route. You can approach those organizations and start talking about these issues.
Yeah, well, that was a very popular question, right? That he brought a lot of, information into the light, and that's really good. That's what we're looking for, as part of the nuclear industry, trying to get better. And yes, like I myself being in part doing, childcare responsibilities, but also elderly care at the same time. I'm at the point as well, and many other people have similar responsibilities in the nuclear industries. And it's good that we are having this discussion today. So I think we might have time for another question. I have, it says, yes, we've been spoken about being a caregiver for children and also caregiver for elderly parents. So is there something specific that we would like to discuss about caring for elderly parents?
I'll just say that I know that that is another valid reason for exploring a tenure clock extension for our faculty. So it is possible, and it's supported by the provost's office here at OSU. So it's not just kids. It's not just adoption is another. Any addition to the family, any major change in the family that requires the attention of an employee is a good reason and can be explored for a tenure clock extension. The other thing I'll say about that is, while we encourage people to take agency in their development to ensure that they have the additional time to explore that, we don't require them to do it. So you can actually say, this is something I'd like to do, and actually request the extension. But if you find that you don't need it, if things are on track anyway, we don't force you to take it. You can actually go forward at your normal advancement rate if things are, if you were able to navigate it and you feel comfortable. So it's sometimes that can be a double-edged sword for people, right? You request the extension. People view that as being, oh, okay, they need extra time to be able to continue to do their, to advance. But some people don't, and we try not to hold any of that against them in the advancement process. But yeah, elder care is something we also try to accommodate for our employees.
I'll share some of my experience. So I think, and this is actually an easy sort of low-hanging fruit that organizations can address. To the extent you can, I think if you can encourage or create a culture where your employees are encouraged to use all of their leave. So I use my leave for childcare. I use it for children's medical appointments, my own appointments, and elder care appointments. And then if I'm lucky, there's a vacation in there somewhere as well. But I'm supported in that. There's never any question, why are you taking this day off? But there are some organizations that I'm aware of that sort of frown upon employees that use all of their leave. And at the same time, I think there are some employees who, for whatever reason, just choose not to use their leave and tend to save it. I come from the federal government, and there was a whole lot of that in the federal government, saving your leave till the end of the year and then using it or losing it. And I recognize that in some situations you just can't. Kristen, I know your plant runs 24/7, and I know there are sometimes you're probably on duty 24/7, and I recognize that not everyone can take leave. But to the extent possible, if organizations can encourage their employees to take the leave for whatever purpose, that helps the employee and it helps the organization.
100% to that. I think that's my advice in this case as well. And I'd like to just talk about something I've done poorly in the past so that hopefully folks can learn from that. I've made a big deal of the flexibility that I would need, that I anticipated needing, proactively with my boss or whoever would listen, when in fact, I probably just needed a therapist instead. Because at the end of the day, I started to notice that a lot of my colleagues actually used more flexibility and more time off and more of those benefits, family medical leave, than I ever did. But I was telling myself a story that it wasn't okay for me to use that sick time, to use family medical leave, to use my whole maternity leave, and to ask for time or an accommodation when I needed it. But in most organizations, it is okay. And that's what those policies and those benefits are there for. And you should feel free to use them. And now you'll need to put it on your calendar, arrange delegates, make sure people are covering critical work, of course, but take responsibility for that, do it, and then take those accommodations when you need them.
Yeah, excellent points. all, each one of you. They have mentioned like very good things. And one of the things that I can hear is that, yeah, I mean, there are challenges still, and I have a few questions. We won't be able to answer all the questions at the moment, but I know there are questions in regards like, oh, how hard childcare it is, how can we make that better, right? And as we move forward, elderly care becomes a challenge as well. And yes, we're trying to, having this type of discussions and conversations to, brainstorm and see, okay, what can we do better? We are very close to the end of the webinar, and we won't be able to answer more questions, but if you're interested in Diversity and Inclusion Committee to host another webinar relating to parents and caregivers in the nuclear industry, please type it in the chat. The more you let us know the questions that you have, we'll try to address them in a future webinar if possible. So I want to thank every one of the panelists here and all the audience for being here in this webinar, Our Nuclear Family, Empowering Parents and Caregivers in the Nuclear Industry. And I want to extend the heartfelt thank you to our amazing panelists for, sharing all their experience and insights today. This discussion hopefully highlighted the nuclear industry's excellent work in terms of parental and caregiver policies. But however, as an industry that is consistently seeking opportunities for improvement and to strive to excellence, this webinar is being helpful for us to take some actionable strategies to create a more inclusive and supportive workplace for our nuclear family. I also want to express the gratitude to the audience today for all the questions in the chat. I really appreciate it. And as we wrap up, let us remember that by supporting parents and caregivers, we are not only enriching the lives, but also we are strengthening the fabric of our industry. So let us continue to advocate for inclusivity and support to all employees, regardless of their caregiving responsibilities. And I invite those considering a career change to explore opportunities in our industry. The nuclear industry is renowned for its commitment to inclusivity and support for individuals from diverse backgrounds. So join us in shaping the future of nuclear. And thank you once again to our panelists and to the audience. Together, we can create a more inclusive and supportive environment for our nuclear family. Thank you so much to each one of you. And I hope you can have the opportunity to type more questions in the chat. And hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions in the next webinar. Thank you so much and have a good day.